It's almost impossible to tell you the extraordinary importance of this exhibition. Remember the Holocaust, as also in Hebrew, Zor et HaShoah, is imperative. It's imperative upon us all to remember the Holocaust. But we can't remember what we don't know. And this exhibition and education program is trying to counter that. We are, of course, featuring man's dual capabilities, absolute evil and infinite good. By and large, most people are good, and this is reflected within our exhibition. We have very few examples of evil people. Also, we are very largely concentrating on art. Art is the real inner spirit of human beings. And where other things have not succeeded, art comes the closest in trying to convey the incomprehensible enormity and horrors of the Holocaust. In particular, we're featuring Alfred Cantor, and his contribution is extraordinarily significant. It really succeeds, above all, in conveying what is impossible to comprehend. These are by Alfred Cantor, who was incarcerated at 3 different extermination camps, and he was an artist, and he kept this diary recording events. Notice I didn't use the word life at the camp because it wasn't really a life, it was more of an existence. So he recorded these various events. Some of these here are from the originals, and others Alfred Cantor had to reproduce from memory after the war because they were lost. There's a whole book, and this is just a segment of it because just not possible to show them all. But essentially, what is very different here, this human experience, which is very different. You look at photographs, and then you look at these, and there is the sense of far greater involvement. In some instances, you can almost smell the stench because the person who committed these to paper was there not only seeing it, but smelling it and feeling it and bearing it all. So these are exceptional in their poignancy and accuracy. In my experience, these drawings and all of Cantor's drawings succeed the greatest in conveying to some extent this incomprehensible event. So, looking at them carefully, you will discover all sorts of very important things. This sculpture here is really the genesis of this exhibition. I had this work as a starting point, and all the rest were created around it. This year it has been further enhanced by a very important additional material. This little boy is called Zvi Nussbaum, and he survived the war, and he became a professor in America. People generally recognize him because he's in very many history books as the human face of this horrendous event. So when we talk about 6 million, when we talk about 1.5 million innocent children, it's just a number. it doesn't mean a thing. But when we see this little boy with his hands raised up, which is exactly what happened to me as well, then we can relate to that, something very different. And of course, when one has nearly been executed, one becomes something different. Nobody has to wait a single moment to do something good for mankind. This panel here depicts General Dwight Eisenhower when he was liberating one of the extermination camps. I'll just quote his message then, which was, "Collect as much proof, films, testimonies, because the day will come when some son of a bitch will say, this has never happened." And of course, sadly, it's all true. And we didn't have to wait long to get the Holocaust deniers. And there's a whole industry, and some of the really prominent participants of that slur, that despicable activity is happening right here in beautiful, peaceful Adelaide. And to do that, it means desecrating even the memory of people as though they never existed. So these various photographs depict the conditions General Eisenhower found. Underneath it here, we have these crumbled, damaged sheets of paper, which have on them the sacred prayers for our new year, which is called Rosh Hashanah, which means head of the year. What is interesting about that is that that was written in a concentration camp by a cantor who had it memorized. Very religious people have most of the prayers and teachings totally committed to memory, which is awesome, really, the information which is stored, and of course here it is reproduced. But how was this possible? It was possible by sheer determination and total faith. This is an extraordinarily inspirational piece. Essentially, this cantor sacrificed his food, which was very meager and almost insufficient to sustain anybody within these concentration camps. He bartered his food ration to get some empty paper cement bags and a pencil. Then he wrote down the prayer. All these were torn into small sections so he could hide it on his body. And then he held a special New Year's service within the camp, again with all the participating inmates sacrificing their food to the Nazis so that they would allow them to have that special session. And for them, this was the most important period of all their incarceration. And it gave them encouragement and hope to live on. There's a little bit of historical data here. It's essentially the attitude and the personalities of these SS people. They are having a merry old time. One of them is playing a piano accordion, and they were within the sight and smell of the burning human flesh at the camp, when they were just thoroughly enjoying themselves. One of the high officers in a concentration camp used Jewish babies as target practice to amuse his children. He had these babies thrown up into the air, and then he would shoot them to amuse his children. How sick is that? One of the main themes is the power of one, which is a wonderful quality each and every one of you has. It's innate. All we have to do is exercise it and make the right decisions. And one of my favorites illustrated here is William Cooper, the Aborigine elder who protested on our behalf, and he's prominently featured here. My hero, my great hero, who in 1938 went to the German consulate in Melbourne to protest on behalf of the Jewish people against the Nazi treatment. Now that I find utterly amazing, because in those days the Aborigine people had absolutely no rights whatsoever, no rights at all. They were not part of the census, they were just non-people where they have lived for 60,000 years. And yet William Cooper had the humanity and the courage to protest on our behalf. It's absolutely wondrous and inspirational. So when I learned about it, I asked, has he been recognized? And I was told, no, nothing happened. So then I started lobbying, which took quite a number of years. Nothing happens quickly in these matters. Finally, almost 70 years later to the actual day when he protested, this picture here depicts the session at the Parliament House in Victoria, specifically in his honor and recognition. And there is a citation here given by the Israeli ambassador to his grandson. At the same time, 70 trees were planted in Israel in his honor. And subsequently, the Hebrew University in Jerusalem has set up a special chair named after him in his honor. So William Cooper will live on as an inspiration. His great-grandson happened to be here when I had the exhibition at the Migration Museum, and I met him at a function, and the following day I was giving a presentation at the museum for some students coming down from Mount Gambier, and as soon as Kevin Russell heard about it, he said, I have to be there. What is extraordinary, this spirit that the Aborigine people talk about, we could all sense through the great-grandson coming from them, which was fantastic. And of course, for all those students, it was just an extraordinary opportunity. I must mention Raoul Wallenberg. He was a Swedish diplomat. He saved 100,000 Hungarian Jews. 100,000. One man. So when we talk about the power of one, which is a very, very important element of this exhibition, this is what one man can do. Wallenberg was the most successful in, say, the Second World War, when the Soviet army liberated Hungary. Wallenberg was arrested in Budapest, taken away to Russia, and that's the end of him. And the Russians never gave out any information how they dealt with him, where and when he died, or whatever the circumstances were. And again, his memory, of course, will live on and inspire others. Now we come to a small part of the resistance. Within it, we have one extraordinary person, and that is Regina Zielinski. She is depicted here. She's a very diminutive. I can't even see any of you of her size. You're all bigger than she is. Maybe that young lady there is about her size. But she's really a giant at the same time, and a wonderful, inspirational, brave person. She has been visiting schools for very many years, and she'll be coming here on Friday as well, all being well. Regina was in Sobibor, again one of the very notorious camps, and she was one of the people who survived the big uprising and escaped there. Afterwards, she went back to Poland, to her township, and obtained a Christian girl's birth certificate. And with that, she volunteered to go to Germany to help the war effort, and thus, that way, she managed to survive and save her life. One other thing on that panel we just came from, there is a very informative map with all the various uprisings. Doesn't include all of them, but some of the major ones. But the important point to remember is that we didn't go like sheep to the slaughterhouse, not at all. There are very many different forms of protests and resistance. Would like to emphasize is the not to hate, the power of one which you possess, and creating a much better and compassionate, humane world than what it has been. There are always plenty of problems and issues, like currently we're having the difficulties how to cope with the refugees, and Aborigines are still hugely disadvantaged. So there's a lot of scope to make it into a much better world. We often hear a very sincere remark, wouldn't it be wonderful to have a tolerant society? And when I hear that, I get very concerned, because to me it means that somebody is tolerant of somebody else, somebody is tolerating. I don't think that is truly the answer. I think it would be much better to aim at a compassionate, caring, loving, valuing society which upholds human rights and human dignity.